Let's talk about the state of the business. This is pretty amazing when you think about how much wrestling has changed in under 6 months here. From the WWF's 95 to 96, this is drastic. Paid attendance goes from 3275 to 5486. The average gate is 44,000 to 80,000. The cable rating is actually down from 2.13 to 2.03, and buy rates are down, oddly, 0.95 to 0.79. Now, what does that mean money-wise? It means they go from an average pay-per-view gross of $2.66 million to $2.19. Business is also on the upswing for WCW. But it's kind of interesting because prior to 96, Meltzer had theorized that house shows were essentially loss leaders, and they're in place to give guys work, keep your local syndicated stations happy, and then try to sell your merchandising and advertising locally. Meltzer wrote specifically, if a show made money, that was good, but the idea was almost to run shows not to lose too much money. The money would largely be made on the monthly pay-per-view show, which was declining rapidly, and in ancillary ways, such as ad revenue, merchandise, magazines, 900 lines, etc. Can you speak to that? Do you think in the mid-90s, let's say 95, that some of the house shows were essentially loss leaders to get to the other revenue, and it was just something you felt like you had to do to promote your pay-per-views?
Traditionally, we were always in the live event business.
Right.
And the television show was a commercial to get people out to the live events. As time wore on and pay-per-view became more popular, more prevalent, it became an advertisement to get people to go and buy the pay-per-view on a monthly basis because you were reaching more people. We never got out of the live event business. It became a loss leader, but that was not intentional. We continued to do it because there was a fear if you took yourself out of the marketplace that you would lose whatever footing you did have. So we continued to do house shows, and it was always the intention to be in the live event business. That was always the business.
I like that you say that, it was to build some pay-per-view, because oddly, even though every other metric is up, pay-per-view is down in 96. But at this point in 96, both companies, WWF and WCW, are turning profits with their house shows. And remember, from the WCW side of things, they even talked about doing away with house shows completely. By this point, the WWF is running less than half as many shows in 96, though, as they were in 95, which really means fewer B-Towns and more A-Town shots. So you'd see some repeats of A-Towns and almost no B-Towns. And, Bruce, that kind of seems like a no-brainer to me. Why does it take until 96 for you guys to start saying, hey, let's just run fewer shows, forget the B-Towns, let's just hit the A-Towns more often? Did that feel like running less shows to Vince was like admitting defeat or backing up?
It was economics. And when he realized that they could make more money off of one big show, we put more guys on it. We made them bigger shows.
Right.
And put more guys on it to give more guys work. And all of a sudden, you started seeing, well, we're making more money here. And in the big scheme of things, the overall plan was to get back to where we could run more than one event a night.
Who recognizes that opportunity to run fewer shows, but essentially bigger shows, and that will be more profitable? Is that something Vince recognizes, or is there a CFO, or is that just a creative decision that the financial people aren't even really privy to?
No, it definitely stems from a financial CFO, and at the time, I don't know if that was Doug Sages or it wasn't Augie. I mean, it may have still been Doug Sages at that point that brings that to Vince's attention, that then brings it to our attention for us to look at and kind of restructure the way that we've been doing business.
I know a lot of people are listening right now who are just fans of wrestling and don't care about the business side, and you're annoyed, but too bad. Skip forward a little bit. I'm not done. The business is on a rise here for the first time since it started to decline sometime in late 92. And this is a big deal here because Meltzer is going to report that Titan had made the decision to drop all the compensation from their syndication package come September. That's a pretty big deal. And let me break down what that means. I think most people listening are in the loop on this. They've been around forever. And the WWF kind of coming to the market and buying out your TV out from under you is the narrative that a lot of the old-timey promoters would still say, this is what happened to me. But a lot of times, they did it to the guy before them, too. Vince just got the last laugh. Well, eventually, the cost of maintaining that syndicated network had become more than the income that they were getting from the national advertising side. So they made the decision to just stop paying for TV time. And that's kind of what happened to Bill Watts and Jim Crockett and how their expenses got out of hand. And it's likely why Smoky Mountain didn't grow much more than it did. And, of course, once upon a time, even ECW participated in this model. Bruce, do you have any interesting stories about these compensation deals you can share with us, or just how this concept worked? Can you shed any light?
Well, let me correct that as well, because when Vince first started his expansion and Vince went out and bought television time in different markets, that was the way. If you go back even before that, a lot of times promoters would simply barter their time. They would get their television show on a local market for free in exchange for 7 minutes of commercial time. The television station that they were on could sell advertising time, and the promoter could keep 7 minutes to promote their shows or sell advertising time or whatever they wanted to do. That was the general model until Vince went around and started buying television time. Well, that evolved when the ratings and the demand for WWF program became so great that they went from paying weekly compensation to stations that now they were asking stations, no different than any other syndicated television program, to pay us. So there were many, many years in there from about 1988, 89 till roughly this time frame that the stations were paying WWE, not the other way around.
Well,
there were still barter situations, but for the most part, they were paying the syndicated program like they would for Wheel of Fortune or other syndicated programs.
So let me be clear. You're saying the WWF was not paying for TV time in '96?
There were some places that they may have been, but the majority of the programs, the stations were paying us, no different than any other syndicated show. There were markets where Vince wanted to keep times, and they may have paid for those. But overall, they had changed the format to where we're going to be like, kept using Wheel of Fortune and every other, King World. If you want our programming, you're going to pay for our programming like you do everybody else. Then you get to this time frame, and this became the age of the infomercial, where you would have Ron Popeil, who was the master of this.
Well, and so I'm glad you bring that up, because that's what Meltzer's saying here, is that now, those guys are coming in and they're offering way more money because they can sell a whole lot more Ronco set it and forget it turkey rotisserie machines than you could wrestling tickets.
Well, and because they had changed the whole format from paying us to now Ron Popeil comes in and says, wait a minute, I'll take that hour of time and I'm going to pay you. So we went from paying to getting paid to now someone coming in and basically doing the same thing to us, going, we'll buy the time and we'll pay you more. You'll make more. You guys are paying for that time. To hell with that. When your contract's up, I'll give you $1,000 an hour for that. And Ron Popeil was paying big money in big markets for a lot of those time slots and made billions.
So Dave gives an example of how this compensation thing works, and he uses the San Francisco market for his example. He talks about when the WWF came to buy TV in '84, they were spending $100,000 a year for a mid-level UHF station, Channel 20. And this is the station that the AWA had been occupying, but of course the AWA can't compete with that, so they're forced out. Eventually, the WWF gains enough popularity to move to Channel 2, which is the leading independent station on the West Coast for both shows, Superstars and Challenge, and they were paying in the neighborhood of around $150,000 per year, plus 5% of the gross from the local house show, and that included closed circuits of WrestleMania and that meant a lot of money back in the day. So as a result, they're drawing huge houses in Oakland and San Francisco and cities like that. Eventually, the NWA gets an opportunity to snag the challenge spot, and that hurts the WWF's drawing ability there while they have it, but it doesn't help the NWA enough to keep it. So when the WWF gets the spot back, business picks right back up. So the idea here is you're able to sell more house show tickets and make more money there if you have the TV in that market, but you might not be able to run these major markets as profitably unless it's this kind of special once-a-year sort of deal. Do I have that right, Bruce?
No. There were deals and there were major markets where we did have a percentage with the television station. They were partners in our promotion to give us X number of ads throughout their programming, and we would give them a percentage of the live events. So that is one thing that incentivized the television stations to take us. And again, we became an actual syndicated product that we were charging money for, and it was easier. It was more attractive to them to, okay, we're paying. What else do we get if we can't sell advertising? We're going to make you a partner in the live event. You make our live event successful, you're going to get a piece of it.
So I just said all that, and then you said no. So what was I wrong?
Well, no, you were wrong about the paying the additional $150,000 or what have you. They may have earned $150,000 throughout the year based on the percentages that they got from the live gates.
And the
I don't think we were paying that kind of money at that time.
So let's talk about this. WCW was beating the WWF in syndication at this point. They were doing 6.49 million homes on 184 stations, and compare that to the WWF's 3.92 million on 155 stations. I don't know why that shocked me, considering WCW was a TV company, but it did. Were you guys internally trying to keep score with those syndication numbers at the time?
Somewhat, but at the same time, they had great deals because of who they were, because they were Turner.
Right.
So they were able to get their programming in a lot of places that we couldn't. So yeah, they had a lot more clearance. But Vince was more interested in being profitable than at that point, because profitable's better.
Well, and that's a weird thing too, to talk about WCW kind of ruling syndication, because once upon a time when it was Crockett just relied on TBS and the Superstation and their dominance in cable, but the WWF was making their hay in syndication, and now that's kind of switched around a little bit. According to the Observer, the WWF felt like even after removing this compensation plan, they were still going to net more than 100 stations who would carry the show, but there was some concern internally that they would risk losing major markets like New York and LA. How big of a concern was it when you guys did actually lose New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles? Was anybody panicking about losing those markets?
Yes, because we had always been there. And it wasn't panic. It was definitely concern. The Vince, man, drawing a line in the sand. It's, by God, you're going to do this or we're out of here. And he would, they would call his bluff and he would leave and go on. So it was, there was a lot of concern, and people were saying, well, let's just focus on cable, where we're reaching the entire country, and buy local spots. It would be the same, and Vince just felt, and there were people, Joe Perkins was a gentleman that sold the syndication and had been with Vince and his dad forever and a day. Joe just felt that you had to have syndication. You had to have local television wherever we went, and that was the way business was done.
To show how much the business had changed from the heyday, I guess the late 80s, the biggest boom in the history up to that point. At that time, they were running nearly 1,000 house shows a year, and here in 96, they're going to run less than 175. Bruce, when do you remember noticing that the schedule had lightened up so much? Was there like an aha moment, like, holy crap, we're not doing nearly what we used to?
I would have to go back and look at my books, but yeah, it was an aha moment from... Well, you've seen my booking books, big, large ledger books, from drawing 3 lines in it to have place for 3 shows and the cards for 3 shows, to drawing one line and having one show a night, and just having all this room at the bottom with nothing in it, and I would fill it with different notes and things like that. But it was right about this time that we went from 3 shows to 2 shows to we're running a show.
But business is still up. Let's run through it. If you take the average attendance in June of 95, it's 3,000 folks. Average attendance in June of 96 is 5,028. The average gate went from $45,860 in June of 95 to $82,266 in June of 96. It's a pretty big deal that you guys were able, to bring in that kind of business, and especially at a time when pay-per-view is seemingly down.